Hey everyone, thanks for joining me for today's explainer. I am so thrilled to share this one with you because honestly, it completely flips the script on how we usually think about military history. Today, we're going to explore how the ultimate weapon of the Second World War, well, it actually wasn't a revolutionary bomb, it wasn't a faster tank, and it wasn't some new fighter plane. Instead, it was an overwhelming, relentless, and completely unglamorous logistical machine.
And that brings us to a really fascinating question. What weapon made German soldiers literally give up before a battle even started? Now, to answer that, we aren't going to look at some high-level strategy room today. Actually, I want to drop you directly into a freezing, snow-covered forest in Belgium. It's December of 1944. Picture this. It's December 17th, 1944. A 20-year-old German grenadier drops into an evacuated American foxhole. Now, the GIs had just left in a hurry, but what this soldier finds, it completely shocks his senses. The sleeping bags are still there, the camp is orderly, and the smell? He hasn't smelled anything like it in over a year. It was real coffee, warm, actual American coffee sitting in a canteen cup wedged right there between two logs. I mean, to a soldier used to the brutal, freezing realities of the front line, an abandoned camp like this felt like an incomprehensible luxury.
And sitting right next to that coffee was a waterproof, wax-coated cardboard box, the famous American K-ration. Inside, there was a small tin of processed cheese, a chocolate bar, cigarettes wrapped in clean cellophane, and, remarkably, a packet of toilet paper. Think about that for a second. The fact that the American Army issued toilet paper in a frontline combat ration, that proved to this German soldier that absolutely everything his own propaganda had told him about those quote-unquote soft, decadent Americans was entirely wrong. This was precision engineering.
Section 1. A warm cup of coffee. So, let's dive into this stark contrast of realities, starting with the very food keeping the soldiers alive. By late 1944, the daily reality for Germans in the trenches was incredibly grim. Their rations were essentially just hard bread, a tiny scrape of margarine, and this ersatz coffee made from roasted barley and acorns that, well, it literally tasted like burnt dirt. Now, compare that against the staggering variety you'd find in just one day's worth of American K-rations. We're talking chopped ham and eggs, hot bouillon, compressed fruit bars, and real instant coffee. The difference wasn't just about taste, it was a glaring difference in capability. And the math here is just incredibly telling. Back home, the average German civilian was practically starving on just 1,670 calories a day. Meanwhile, you have the American private sitting in a freezing foxhole with 2,800 sealed, ready-to-eat calories that didn't even require a cook or a supply truck to be prepared, and the whole shebang was neatly packed into a box the size of a man's hand. Section 2. The American War Machine. Now, zooming out from that single foxhole to the macro level, we can see exactly how this unbelievable abundance was created on assembly lines back in the States, in places like Willow Run, Michigan. When you compare daily supply consumption, the numbers are just staggering. A single American division on the Western Front consumed 750 tons of supplies every single day. The German army figured its divisions needed roughly 200 tons a day, and honestly, by late 1944, they rarely even got that. But here's the truly wild part. That 750 tons of daily American consumption wasn't the limit of what their factories could produce. No, it was just the physical limit of what their trucks could haul. The German 200 tons, on the other hand, was purely theoretical. And to physically manifest this overwhelming system of supply, the U.S. Army created the Red Ball Express. This was a massive convoy system using nearly 6,000 trucks, running day and night on dedicated one-way highways. Driven largely by African-American soldiers working these grueling 20-hour shifts, the Red Ball Express moved over 412,000 tons of supplies in just 81 days. Just let this number sit with you for a moment. 96,000. In 1944 alone, American factories produced 96,000 aircraft. And that's alongside 2.4 million trucks, 100,000 armored vehicles, and 41 billion rounds of ammunition. The United States was literally producing more than half of all manufactured goods on the entire planet. Section 3. The Luxury of Waste. Now, as you'll see, this massive industrial power ultimately translated into profound psychological warfare. Let's look at the concept of waste. This right here is the haunting question that infected the minds of hardened German veterans. You see, when an American unit moved forward, they'd casually leave behind extra rations, sleeping bags, and equipment.
The American soldier didn't hoard because, well, he didn't need to. He knew the pipeline was endless. But for the German soldier, who literally had to pull boots off the dead and account for every single bullet, seeing this casual waste forced them to ask, wait, if the enemy can afford to just throw this away, what does he still have? We see this so powerfully contrasted in the medical realities. The German medical system was entirely collapsing. Frontline units were reusing bandages and performing surgeries without anesthetics. But the American army, they provided every single private, every rifleman, every cook with their own individual sterile medical kit, complete with sulfonamide powder for infections and a morphine syringe for pain. Finding those kits hit the German veterans so deeply.
And then there were the comfort items. Playing cards, fresh batteries, razor blades, real soap, and envelopes that were pre-stamped for free postage back home. Now, these items had absolutely zero tactical value, but together they painted a devastating picture. A nation capable of supplying perfectly trivial comforts to a soldier out in a frozen forest was undeniably, overwhelmingly superior in power. Section 4, the rapid Allied recovery. Okay, so Hitler staked everything on the Ardennes offensive in December of 1944, but structurally, it was practically a parasitic operation. The German attack relied entirely on capturing American fuel depots just to keep their own tanks moving.
Tracking the timeline of the attack paints a really grim picture for Germany. The assault begins on December 17th. By December 23rd, the skies clear and the overwhelming U.S. Air Force strikes back. But the truly terrifying part for the German army was what happened next. The Americans suffered roughly 75,000 casualties and lost hundreds of tanks. Yet, by the end of January 1945, so just 5 weeks later, the U.S. Army had absorbed the blow, metabolized it, and returned physically stronger than they were before the attack even began.
So, how did they do it? Well, while Germany's losses of 80,000 men and 800 tanks were absolutely permanent, the Americans refilled their cupboards practically overnight. Within weeks, 68 ships loaded with replacement equipment and 49,000 fresh replacement soldiers arrived from the U.S. The German soldiers saw fresh tire tracks, new telephone wires, fully restocked foxholes. The realization that their ultimate offensive hadn't even dented the American machine, it completely broke German morale. Section 5, the arithmetic of defeat. So, this overwhelming physical evidence led to a mathematical conclusion of defeat. It wasn't about cowardice. It was simply soldiers doing the arithmetic of their own doom. By the spring of 1945, American intelligence officers noticed a really fascinating pattern. Surrendering German soldiers were carrying small American items right in their pockets. A sealed packet of Nescafe, a carefully folded Hershey wrapper, an unopened tin of processed cheese. They weren't carrying these things as food, though. They were carrying them as tangible proof, a physical reminder they kept close to their chest that their fight was completely hopeless against such impossible abundance. This phenomenon was perfectly captured by covert British listening stations at Trent Park, where captured German soldiers were recorded speaking freely to one another. One officer described the impact of seeing this abundance as, and I quote, the realization arriving all at once through the stomach rather than the mind that the war could not be won. The feeling of defeat spread through the ranks not to be a battlefield losses, but through material abundance. The Allied Psychological Warfare Division ended up dropping millions of safe conduct passes over German lines, promising food and fair treatment to anyone who surrendered. But here is the secret. Those printed passes, they only worked because the German soldier had already tasted the chocolate. They had already smelled the coffee. Their own senses confirmed that an army that packed toilet paper and chewing gum in a combat ration could easily, effortlessly feed its prisoners. Which leaves us with this final provocative thought to reflect on today. Was the most powerful weapon of the Second World War simply the unremarkable garbage of the best supplied army in history? It is absolutely incredible to think about how a warm cup of coffee and a casually discarded cardboard box bypassed every wall of discipline and ideology, breaking the will of an entire army before a shot was even fired. Thanks so much for learning with me today, and I will catch you in the next explainer.